For SMBs and professional services, whether it's law, healthcare, consulting, or staffing, successfully embracing AI involves far more than simply choosing the right technology. It demands having the right people in place, aligning your organizational structure, and cultivating a strategic mindset that leverages AI's full potential. Today, we're exploring exactly how business leaders can pinpoint critical talent gaps, strategically redesign their organizations, and practically integrate AI into day-to-day operations. To guide us through this journey, I'm excited to welcome Robert Hatta, an expert with over 15 years of experience partnering with startups, venture capital, and SMB leaders to solve talent challenges, design high-performing teams, and build clear roadmaps for successful AI adoption. Robert, welcome to Just Curious.
Great. Thanks for having me, Stu.
Before we dive in, can you share a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and how AI became such a central part of your work advising SMB leaders?
Sure. Well, it actually was sort of a happy accident that I found myself working with SMBs around a portion of their AI strategies. Most of the last 15 years, and the prior dozen years as well, have been spent inside the tech industry. So venture-backed tech companies, product businesses, where I was helping the founders of those businesses envision what a future state, usually on a growth trajectory of their company, would look like, almost always very different from the company they had today. And understand that future state, what are the capabilities of that company, need to be, growth goals need to be, and then helping them map a talent strategy on how to get there. What are the capabilities and new functions you need to build? Do you need to up-level your team? Is now the time to add a board, or those kind of things? I did that inside of venture capital funds for the better part of the last 15 years as a talent partner. And for the last year and a half, I've been an independent consultant. And as it turns out, working not with venture-backed tech companies, but with owner-operated white-collar services businesses, in some cases decades old, who found themselves at this intersection of wanting to adopt new technologies like AI and integrate them into their offerings, but were really struggling when they found that they didn't have the right people, team structures, and the things you mentioned to do that. And it turns out that that exercise of helping them build those strategies and move along those paths towards building a different company than the one they have today looks a lot like what I did for VC-backed companies over the last decade plus.
When SMB leaders approach you, what specific problems or pain points are they typically experiencing that signal they need your expertise?
Yeah, it's usually they're coming to me at what I think is probably the third stage of awakening to what AI means for their businesses. Stage one, I would say, is that light bulb moment when they realize and get enough of an understanding, in some cases a layperson's understanding, but enough of an understanding to really wake up to, wow, these tools, these technologies, these models can really do some incredible things. How do I implement that into my business in ways that drives growth or margin expansion, or minimally keeps us from getting beaten by the competition? That's sort of stage one. Stage two is they go into the marketplace, sort of looking to kick the tires or learn more, or sort of shop for what's out there. And immediately the reaction is, oh my God, there's so much out here. I don't understand a lot of these things. Their capabilities are changing all the time. They're just being bombarded and overwhelmed. Half of them end up just quitting, going back to business as usual. Forget it. I don't understand it. This is crazy. The other half get to the next stage, which is, while I'm confused and still a little overwhelmed, let's start trying some things. And they put it into their teams, they put it into their companies. And this is sort of the third stage, after which they come and find me, which is they realize they don't have the right people. And not just the obvious things like the technical skill sets. How do you integrate into these models? How do you pull data from and feed data into those models to build meaningful use cases? But it's a lot of it is the mindsets. These white collar services companies, again, over decades have been optimized almost like an assembly line, very task oriented. The people in those companies, while highly specialized and skilled, are very incremental in how they think about and how they perform their tasks. What AI forces them to do is to rethink everything, reimagine what we do for our customers and how we do it, and then come back to the models and see how they help. Just that order of operations is a really different mindset than the ones that exist in these services businesses and have been embedded for decades. And it's after that sort of at least one or maybe two or more cycles of frustration trying to get the teams, in some cases, the leadership of these teams, to understand and implement these tools and put them to work. They come to me with the sort of the request of help me build this organization into one that can leverage AI and find out what it is we're missing along the way.
Yeah. And when one of those companies begins working with you, what does your initial assessment look like in practice? Can you walk us through the steps you take to quickly identify their talent or capability gaps?
Yeah. So that's also a three-step process. It starts with making sure that the business owner, and it's almost always the business owner, truly understand what it is they're trying to become. Like this, in some cases, playing back to them what they already know, but in a lot of cases, refining and adding to what in a lot of cases are somewhat simplistic views of what the modern AI-enabled services businesses look like. So really walking them through like, this is what you're talking about, right? A company that can solve more sophisticated problems for your customers, that is full of sort of rapid iteration, solution oriented versus task oriented people who are really embedded with their customers and leveraging that expertise they already have, but coming up with new solutions. And you get a lot of, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So that's sort of stage one, is like really bringing into focus this future version of their company they're trying to become. Then I go in and I do what is in some cases a pretty lengthy, but definitely a deep dive into the company they have today. Assessing the teams, assessing the organizational structures, what functions might be lacking or mindsets might be missing. Let's look at some of the operational data of how things are done, the workflows, where there are friction points, et cetera. But all with the single goal of understanding and presenting back to the business owner, this is the company you got today. So we talked about the one you want to have in the future. Now I'm showing you a reflection of what you got today. Do you see the gaps? And that's the third stage, is we go through those gaps and I findings workshop, out of which we come out with, and here are the steps to closing those gaps. Here are the functions that you need to add that you're missing. Here are the folks on your team that you might need to either train or up level in some other way or replace, all to come away with a roadmap that gets you towards that future state you want to become, and gives you the company, the organization that is truly equipped to implement AI solutions and ultimately whatever it is the goals are, to drive market expansion, or otherwise put your company in a better position to succeed.
Yeah. You often highlight product management as a critical capability that SMBs lack for successful AI integration. Why is product management so foundational when it comes to adopting AI effectively?
Yeah. Well, first, it requires people have a sort of a shared understanding of what product management is. And my understanding comes from the tech industry, where the product manager plays a very central cross-functional role. They're ultimately required to deliver economic or other values to the customer that drives economic value into the business, is aligned with the capabilities, the technical capabilities of the business. All of those assets need to be aligned and to ship a product, to bring a product into the world, to make it better or to take it into new markets. This critical function has to understand the commercial objectives of the business. It has to understand whatever the goals are of the customer. It has to deeply understand the different functions internal to the company responsible for delivering the different aspects of that value. And then it has to sort of herd the cats to make all those things happen again and again and again. That often not only doesn't exist inside of these services companies, and I'll come back to why, but in many cases, it's not even understood that role I just described is a thing. And not only is it a thing in the tech industry, it's the central nervous system of tech companies. Like that you go inside of Google or Meta or Uber or NVIDIA, or you name your tech company, the product organization is sort of the central hub of how that company brings its products to market and ultimately how it makes money and succeeds. Not the case in a services business. Center of gravity might be the sales organization, or it might be the service delivery organization. But the function as I described it is almost never manifest in a single person or a single role. And I think it's absolutely essential when implementing AI, because that's the function that ties it all together in terms of what do our companies want? How does that line up with the financial or economic goals of the business? What are the capabilities in this case, maybe not our technical capabilities, but what are the capabilities of these models out there, and which ones do we use, and how do we bring it all together in terms of redefining our business? What are the use cases? How do we test and iterate our way to increasing influence of AI technologies in our offering? These are all things, experiments, tracking, measuring, launching, killing in some cases, the features and the services that you deliver, some of which will now be AI enabled. That's all product management. And when I describe this to a lot of the SMB owners that I work with, get a lot of head nods. Yes, 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 yes. But then when I look inside of their organizations, they've been optimized around, like I said, linear task-oriented mindsets versus this sort of cross-functional solution-oriented mindset. And they simply just don't have these people doing what I consider to be not only product management, but like the most critical function to bringing these tools into their companies.
How can non-technical leaders best assess their current team's readiness and ability to successfully adopt AI?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough exercise because in a lot of cases, the SMB leaders I'm working with are not technical themselves. How do you assess the technical capabilities of your teams when you are truly a native technologist yourself? That is a very tough thing to do. First of all, find people who know what they're talking about and ask them. Again, that's in a lot of cases how I get brought in. I've worked with technical teams my whole career. I've been on technical teams my whole career. I can come in and if not, immediately assess the capabilities and the strengths and the blind spots of a team and its leadership. I'm a quick text, phone call, email away from a dozen experts who are just as good, if not better. Being able to come in and not only does this person have what it takes or not, but a lot of cases it's, yeah, they might not, but they can get there. And these are the steps to get them there. That's something that is, again, part of that 3-step assessment process that I do for my clients.
I'd love to walk through an example. You shared with me a example or case study with a legal services firm that you worked with recently. How did you go about identifying their capability gaps, and what were the most surprising insights that were revealed by your initial assessment?
Yeah. I mean, this is really a standard example of what I see across a lot of these different services industry, SMBs. In this case, it was a commodity legal services firm, a law firm, but a very specialized law firm that is more around managing cases through highly regulated, in some cases lengthy process that requires a lot of a lot of it's fairly rote and repetitive, but it does require highly specialized skill around troubleshooting or figuring out many of the different variables that can come into the process. Again, the obvious response is like, that's a great case study, use case for AI. And it is. There's a lot of things that can be automated. There's a lot of workflows that can be up-leveled to be more than leading of the clients versus responsive and reactive. And there's a lot of margin expansion opportunity too. So it is really a typical use case of what I see amongst these types of services businesses. And in that, they went on a journey, like I said, that 3-step journey where the CEO got really excited about AI, thought it to be sort of a rip and replace exercise where you simply find these tools in the market, come to your business, yank out whatever inefficient, repetitive process you find, and then drop these things in and off you go. Problem number one was a sort of simplistic view of not only how to integrate these tools into your business, but that it was a very sort of rip and replace, lift and shift sort of exercise. Second part is like, clearly came in out of that exercise with a frustrated team that said, not only do we not know what you're asking us to do, but two, it's really disruptive to the things we have to do every day. You know, we have jobs, we've been doing them the same way, serving the same customers for a long, long time. Sure, there's opportunity for incremental improvement, but you're asking us to behave, not only behave in a totally different way, but it's also super disruptive to the support and services we offer today. And I came in the middle of this sort of, I think, a multi-stage sort of frustrating process of a team that was built to do something very differently, being asked to do something they'd never done before. And without the internal technical capabilities to even really get started. I'm not talking about advanced level internal engineering and data management and security and all those things. They were really lacking a lot of the basics. And my job was to quickly understand that. Again, articulate back to them what they're trying to become. In this case, with a little bit more realistic understanding of what AI truly can do, but also like it's not just this simple snap your fingers and we're now this amazing tech company. And so there's some expectation setting. Two, the functions and the workflows and the way that these products and use cases get brought to life inside of a tech company and how very different that is than the team and the organizational structures you have there today. And then the final output was, let's go find you the leader of that team. Yes, there's a lot to be brought in terms of product design and product management, but it always starts with who can build that for you internal to the company. And how do I help you understand what that person looks like and go out and help you get them? And that's what ultimately ended up happening. A couple of months of work with that client. And we had a new head of product development who had a software development background, who'd been in product-led organizations at some of the most cutting-edge tech companies at the time. and came with the background of, I know the type of people and teams that are required to understand these capabilities, build them into our offering, test and iterate, measure. And not only in that sort of technical standpoint, but also bringing in a very needed cultural and mindset difference that was open to these very new types of experimental projects.
What is it like to integrate someone whose background is in technology into a services organization that may not have changed in many years? What is that integration like?
Yeah. Whew, it's tough. And it's tough on both sides. It's tough for the services business owners, one, to understand what the true differences are in these people, their backgrounds and things they can do. And the way I've helped them get to that understanding is to show it to them. Again, I've worked my whole career in this industry. I've got a fantastic network of really brilliant people who've done all these things, just who are willing to sit down, have a coffee, explain what they do, how they got there, and in doing so, educate the business owner as to what these functions and what these roles look like in the flesh. And I've found there's no better way to do that than to put people together. The second challenge is, frankly, like these people do cost more in the market than sort of your standard IT back office, information security, sort of not the people who build products, but the people who maintain your IT, which is often what is confused with what these product makers and builders do. So there is a bit of education in terms of the market. Now, what these people can do and how much they cost is not ultimately that expensive. In fact, it's in a lot of cases can ultimately come cost neutral. You're spending less on outside vendors for software development. You have a much smaller but more sophisticated internal technology team, not to mention the value that they create. So yes, there's investment required up front and often some sticker shock on what these people cost. But in the long run, you're talking about a smaller, more sophisticated, more technology enabled business and all the benefits that come with it. So that's sort of the service company side. On the other side, these are people coming from pretty sexy, exciting companies and businesses that are, on the cutting edge of innovation, names like Meta and Uber and Google and things like that, or maybe those that tried to become those types of tech companies. That's their backgrounds, and culturally, those are very different than these sort of legacy services businesses. What you need to convince those people, that they can have outsized impact on these services businesses, and that these are real people doing real things, which it isn't always the case in the tech industry in terms of the value or the customer you solve. If you can get them excited about the problems these services companies solve and the importance of the people who do that problem solving, you can get them excited, but it's not obvious for a product manager coming out of Amazon to say, yeah, I'll go work for a law firm. So I sort of find myself sitting in the middle of that marketplace, trying to get people to understand each other and get excited about working together.
Do you support the team in embracing and collaborating with these new capabilities post hire?
Yes. In a lot of cases, there is quite a bit of training that goes into sort of what the existing team, you want to give them a chance to grow, to understand, to grow, to change into what this new world expects of them. And many of them are up for it. And not only are they up for it, they bring with them incredible domain experience or customer relationships, or sort of understand the nuance of what that company does in ways that software currently can't. And if the best possible scenario is to retain that expertise, leverage it, even up level it with these capabilities. And takes a while. It takes training. It takes giving people a chance to learn how to do things differently than they've been expected to do before. Not everybody gets through that experience, but a lot of sort of my stage 2 and beyond projects, after sort of putting leadership in place or bringing in some key skill sets, is to work with those existing teams and get everybody else to a place where they're benefiting and in a position to better drive value to their companies and customers with these technologies.
What advice would you offer a CEO who's hesitant about making significant talent changes or strategic hires specifically for AI initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, there's really nothing I can say that is as powerful as sort of going through that three-step journey I described at the beginning, which is one, you've already, I'm going to assume that you've already woken up to and maybe you've gotten religion on what these technologies can do and how they can impact your business. I'm hopeful that there is some level of understanding and experience going into the market and kicking the tires on some of these things. But on the third step, I almost think it's essential to go into that and to stub your toe. And the third step is you think your team can just start pulling these things off the shelf and putting them into motion and integrating them into their workflows. I have a hard time in any scenario, really, even with the founders I worked with inside of VC funds of saying, hey, you should do it this way instead of that way. It's only when they've done it that way and come back and realized, wait, we're not equipped for this, or we thought we knew what we were doing and we don't, or we thought this would work and it failed. Only then can I really start to be helpful after there's a fuller, more experiential understanding of the challenge. It's not as easy as you think to get these organizations, the people inside them, the mindsets, the skill sets, the organizational structures. They equate it to thinking you can yank an electric motor out of an EV and swap out the engine of an internal combustion vehicle. And that's as simple as it is. Now, you drop the EV inside of your Ford Bronco and now I've got all the efficiency gains and benefits of an EV. Well, it turns out those are totally different platforms and they require different parts and different things go in different places inside of an EV. You don't need a fuel tank or a cooling system inside of an EV and those things, or a drivetrain, and those things take up massive real estate in the design of a traditional vehicle. You kind of have to go through that experience of thinking it's that simple and finding out it's not before I could be helpful. And I think that's my advice is go out and try so that you understand. And then I think you'll be in a better position to know what you're up against and what it takes.
Yeah. In your experience, what practical methods can SMBs use to foster a culture of continuous learning and experimentation and adaptation to sustain long-term AI success?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because, again, a lot of these businesses have been optimized to become very specialized, sort of assembly line style workflows where, the people who are doing the thing are very good at it. But what happens before or after they do their thing is, if it's understood at all, it's sort of pretty blurry. And I think that encouraging or rewarding or structuring in some way cross-training, cross-learning, more solution-oriented mindsets so that these service providers, these employees, these workers, these associates can zoom out and understand not only what they do, and in many cases do very well, but how does it fit? Why does it matter? What are the dependencies of other things? Like when you can understand that, now you can understand, well, actually, we can make this whole thing better. It's not just, how do I improve that one little thing I do? How do I make it easier? How do I automate it? How do I make it less error prone? That all helps, but it's not the right mindset to truly leverage AI's capabilities. You need to be able to see things in a holistic, solution-oriented way where you're like, what are we trying to solve for our customers? And can these tools help us do that better? And how would we design them or rethink them? That is the missing piece that can be or the underused muscle that can be developed in ways that, whether you're doing something now in AI or not, in the future can give you a better team and a more ready team for those types of tools.
Someone listening right now feels stuck or overwhelmed by AI adoption. What's one simple step you'd recommend they take today to move forward more confidently?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that fear, the paralysis, that feeling of being overwhelmed comes from a sort of outdated way of thinking about technology, that you have to invest in this big multi-month, in some case multi-year project. It's going to replace these workflows or these software tools that you already have, sort of this big enterprise transformation, change management, whatever you call it, exercise. And that's scary as hell. It's expensive. And it's understandable why a business owner would say, oh my God, it's overwhelming. I'd rather not. And it's why a lot of companies kick the can in terms of updating and replatforming their, in many cases, super outdated technologies. AI is not like that. You can take small bites. You can look at different use cases in the business and test. Does this thing make it better? How do people interact with it? Even in my own writing, I've evolved to use AI tools and chatbots as sort of a co-pilot way where I'm instead of asking them to do things for me, I'm asking them to do things with me. And that was something I had to evolve into through use, iteration, and bumping into like, oh, I didn't know it could do that. Oh, wow, let me play with that. So all to say, small bites, small experiments, or exposing people to some tools and saying, play with this and see what it can do. That's not a big expensive task. That's not an enterprise lift and shift, and can start to educate the people and draw out those people. Like, these are the few folks I've got on my team that are able to quickly think more in a solutions mindset versus a task oriented mindset. These are the people who are finding ways to use these tools in ways I wasn't able to foresee. So it's not only a much more manageable small bite experience for the company, it could also help identify those people you have already that could be sort of the stars and champions of these tools.
For people listening who are wondering whether they're a good fit for what you do, what's the profile of a good client of Robert Hatta? Like industry size,
Yeah.
et cetera.
The industries have been pretty broad, though I'll describe them all as pretty much white collar services businesses. So these are staffing firms, supply chain logistic brokers. We talked about law firms, engineering firms, where the service they deliver is ultimately a process, one that includes sort of repetitive portions, but also in many cases layers on a lot of highly specific domain experience. I've worked with companies, 4 or 5 million in annual revenue up to companies in the hundreds of millions of annual revenue. And the problem sets across the industries and the size differences are the same. And that is they've gone through stages 1, 2, and 3. I understand that these tools are important if I'm going to succeed or grow or expand my business, or at least hold off competition from those that might adopt these technologies in a more native way than we are. I've gone out in the market and I've seen what's out there, and I'm kind of scared and overwhelmed, but I'm still moving forward. And then 3, where I've tried to get my teams to understand and implement these tools and redesign our business, we've struggled and failed. And that's, if that describes you, regardless of how big of a company you are or in what specific services sector you're in, that describes the clients I've been working with and helping get to that sort of meaningful next stage of actually doing something with AI that changes their business in a positive way.
Do you think AI adoption will ultimately mean fewer jobs in professional services or simply different, higher value ones?
Yeah, and that is a big topic that a lot of people worry about, and a lot of hand wringing there. I think there's a couple of things. I would say, and a lot of the businesses I described have for decades been leveraging skilled but offshore labor to bring down a lot of their costs in the delivery of these services. I think that those jobs could be at substantial risk of what AI can do, because those are, while they're highly skilled white collar back office jobs, there's already this sort of mindset of optimizing costs down, and that's probably the first bite that AI can take out of those businesses and drive margin expansion. Anything that's customer touching, where relationships, credibility, partnership, how do I partner with our clients to help them avoid problems or find value versus respond or react, those jobs I think are as safe as they're ever going to be. If anything, they're enabled in ways that make those types of jobs much, much more valuable. So that's our frontline, customer-facing, solution-oriented, consultative skills and mindsets. You're going to be a big winner. It's the middle that will need to learn and adapt. Like, how did these capabilities enable versus simply replace skills? There will be winners and losers in that middle, for better or worse. And my advice to those companies and the people in those roles is the best way to avoid being a loser in that is to understand and to embrace and to adopt those technologies. And if you can do that, then who knows? There may be an entirely different opportunity to serve customers or to further your career with those skills in tow.
Awesome. Robert, I really appreciate you coming by. Just curious and bringing clarity and practicality to the role that talent plays in adoption.
My pleasure. And thanks for giving me an opportunity to share with you today.